Well, welcome to this week's edition of Campaign Catch Up, a weekly segment that gets you up to speed on where things stand in the race for the White House. CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody and host of the DC Debrief podcast, John Stolnis, are my guests today. Thanks for being here, guys. David, I'll start with you. What jumps out at you right now? A lot happened over the weekend as kind of the top ticket story right now in this campaign.
Right. Well, obviously, right now it's all about the VP pick. I mean, that's what's standing out, and we can get into that. I mean, the contours of the race clearly are changing to a degree, at least in the polls. And now we wait to see what sticks. And I think the question for Kamala Harris will be, can she keep up the momentum? She'll get more of a boost at the convention, and then after that, we wait and see. Does she do a press conference? Does she do interviews? She may be able to ride out this honeymoon phase all the way through the next 3 months or so, and that's the bad news for the Trump campaign. And they've struggled on messaging for sure. And so you put all that together, and we have a brand new race. And we have a brand new race that it's really hard to handicap at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people are saying, like you said, that honeymoon phase, and she hasn't picked the VP yet. And a lot of people are saying, well, at least critics of Kamala are saying, well, you've got basically the press running as her VP right now, like trying to make things look good. And, that's the way it feels to a lot of critics right now. John, talking about the VP pick here, one of the big stories, and we talked about this over the weekend, was these leaks that happen on social media and these, oops, we sent out this post and it kind of looked like you were announcing it. First with Shapiro and then with Kelly. Talk about those. What's going on there?
Yeah, so on Friday, the mayor of Philadelphia tweeted out a video praising Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee. And by that point, she wasn't yet the presumptive nominee, but they were in the process of tabulating delegates, and it was clear that she was going to be. But it also, at the end, featured a good 15, 20 seconds hailing Mark Shapiro as her running mate.
Now, of course,
Josh Shapiro, I'm sorry, thank you, yes. And Josh Shapiro as her running mate. And that pick has not been announced, of course. They were not expecting to hear that until Tuesday morning. And so it was an official video released by the mayor's office. There was an aide in the mayor's office who admitted to sending out a video that was supposed to go out on Monday morning, but instead released it on Friday. So that got everybody speculating. Has the decision already been made? And of course, Vice President Harris met with different candidates over the course of the weekend, Senator Mark Kelly, Josh Shapiro, and Governor Tim Waltz of Minnesota. But then you also had Mark Kelly at some point during the course of the weekend with a cryptic tweet that said something along the lines of, now my focus is to serve the people of Arizona, or something to that effect, which he then deleted not long after that. So it kind of feels as though we're starting to get some tea leaves put in front of us from some of these contenders, these candidates. And Reuters was reporting here on Monday that it's down to two, that it's down to Governor Waltz and it's down to Governor Shapiro. No idea if that's actually true or not, but those appear to be the two candidates right now.
Well, you hear that. Look, I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and at least here the local politicians talk, and they'll say things, behind closed doors, kind of like, well, the election runs through Pennsylvania and Pennsylvania runs through Bucks County. And so Shapiro, like we've talked about, guys, would be an interesting choice. But David, you have a big voice inside Democrats that are critical of Shapiro, and I saw one post that said for his views, and a lot of people are taking that to be because he's Jewish. So what is your take on Shapiro, and just who do you think is coming out of this thing?
Well, guys, it's a great question. And, as I work my sources, there's a lot of, not confusion, but there's a lot of unknowns at this point, and we're down to the last hour here. Let me say a couple of things. Why don't we start with Shapiro? Obviously, the governor from Pennsylvania, if they win Pennsylvania, that's a big deal. He's considered a little bit more of a centrist. I wouldn't call him a centrist, but he kind of has that centrist vibe a little bit. He's he's kind of pro school vouchers, and there's some other things. And by the way, and you guys know, being Philly guys, I mean, his oratory skills are phenomenal. I mean, he's just, and the way he works the media, it kind of reminds me of Obama a little bit. I mean, he's really
natural, very natural.
He's extremely natural. I mean, I think if I'm in the Harris campaign, I'm a little concerned that he may upstage her a little bit. I'll be honest with you. I mean, he's got so much potential. And you don't want that if you're Harris. Here's another thing. Here's a concern, too. Clearly, we're talking about this idea that he's Jewish. Now, look, I mean, some of the anti-Semitism has definitely reared its ugly head in Democrat circles. It's a small minority of Democrats. Having said that, they're vocal. And so if she goes away from Harris, that'll be a bit of a storyline that she didn't stand up to the anti-Semitic left in the party. But having said that, I'm not convinced it's going to be Shapiro. I know a lot of people think it's going to be. Here's the deal electorally. Everybody's like, oh, well, Pennsylvania is a positive for her because he can bring Pennsylvania. Okay, let's just say that happens. Fine. But still, if she just wins Pennsylvania and loses Michigan and Wisconsin, she's going to have a very hard path. I mean, she'd have to win Arizona and Georgia, and she's losing both of those right now. So just to win Pennsylvania doesn't lock anything in for Harris at all. Now, that takes me over to Tim Waltz, who more of a kind of a Rust Belt feel to him, former high school teacher, former football coach, not your typical politician growing up. I mean, in other words, he's kind of like, he has a different vibe. I'll be honest with you, put a hat on him and he looks a little MAGA.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I mean, he's kind of like the dad at the MAGA rally. And if you've ever seen him do this great PSA he did in Minnesota with his daughter about hands-free driving, it's hilarious. The guy's got a dry sense of humor. He's the one that coined the term that's so weird with Vance and Trump. And there's a lot more with Walz. I mean, he's solidly progressive, but he's a guy that won't upset the base. And I think ultimately, guys, when all is said and done, what Kamala Harris needs right now, she doesn't need any controversies. She needs a bit of a glide path, if you will. She needs no hiccups to run the table. And I think Shapiro is a hiccup for her. I think Waltz is not. Waltz is probably the safer pick. Shapiro's got more of the upside. When I say upside, I'm talking about, he's really, what's the word I'm looking for? He's a figure, I mean, he's a guy that he's got a commanding presence. So I think Waltz is probably the better pick for her in this spot, even with the Pennsylvania thing being out there, because I'm not convinced. I'm sorry, I know I'm rambling, but I'm not convinced that Pennsylvania is the be all end all that everybody thinks it is. I mean, once again, crucial, got to have it. But if you get it, it doesn't mean you win if you're the Democrats, for sure.
No, it's an interesting perspective, David, because if you think about Waltz, now here's a guy that doesn't have the name familiarity across the country, which may be the perfect thing for the Harris campaign right now, because you only have a couple months left to the election. So what are you going to do? Is the Trump team going to spend a lot of time, John, and sit here and try to define this guy in the last 3 months when he's not even on the front of the ticket? I mean, if you want a glide path, like David said, John, I think a pick like that could make a lot of sense.
It could. There are great arguments to be made for both of these potential candidates. And I think that's the thing. I don't really think Harris can lose no matter which one of these two guys that she picks, in terms of a strong ticket that Democrats will get behind and a ticket that independents might want to take a second look at, because I think David hit all the right notes there. Shapiro is a fantastic speaker. He's extremely smart. He's very popular in Pennsylvania. I think it's generally been accepted that a vice presidential pick will get you maybe an additional 1 to 2 points in the state in which that governor is from or that senator might happen to be from. So if he's giving her an extra point or two in Pennsylvania, that might be enough to win Pennsylvania. And the argument would be maybe that's the first domino of the blue wall that helps fall, because if he's popular in Pennsylvania, he can maybe help you in some of the other states that David has mentioned. And Waltz doesn't really give you that with Minnesota. Minnesota is not one of those states that is of vital importance on the electoral map. They're all important, but Waltz doesn't really give you, if you win Minnesota because of Waltz, it's not as important as if you win because of Shapiro in Pennsylvania. And so I agree that there's some of the pitfalls there with both of those guys as well. And I was watching an interview Waltz gave a couple of weeks ago where he was asked, what is the last time you remember going out in public without having any handlers with you or any bodyguards? And what is it that you did? He said something like, I think I went to my Ace hardware store and got a filter for my air compressor or something. You know what I mean? That's what he's doing. He's very much a down home folksy kind of guy. And that could really appeal to the independents who don't really want a buttoned up politician type person.
Yeah. 30 seconds. If I could just add one thing
go
on
for
Shapiro. One concern will be at the convention. If she picks Shapiro, You're going to have the anti-Semitic left. Once again, they're a minority, but they're loud. There could be a big ruckus at the convention. That's not what they need. They don't need that. And that may be coming anyhow because they're frustrated with the Democrats as a whole. But if you pick Shapiro, I think you like that powder keg. And I think that could be a potential problem down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And, let's shift gears a little bit to the economy here, guys. Obviously, the Dow Jones, took a little bit of a tumble today here. Not a little bit of a significant one. And so obviously you already have these economic concerns out there. Let's talk about the narratives for each campaign on this and each side on this, because I've already seen ads. I saw one that was pretty effective that was going around on social media where it was just showing, the groceries going across and the gas pump spinning and, kind of really just making you feel that the weight of the costs that everybody's dealing with right now. And so that seems to be one way that the Trump campaign's going with it. Let's talk about this. John, I'll start with you. How does the Harris campaign deal with this? Number one, the economy taking a downturn if this continues. And then how does Trump put this on Kamala? Because it's a little easier to put it on Biden. I've even heard him say it a couple of times because they called it Bidenomics, right? And so he's not in the race. How does Trump effectively spin this, and what does Kamala do? I'll start with you, John.
Well, I mean, I think if they're attaching the economy to Biden, it's very easy to also then attach it to Kamala Harris because she's his vice president. It's the Biden administration, so I think that's the argument that they would make. Now, what kind of an influence does she have on economic policy? I don't think she's had much of an impact, but it's her administration. She's number two in that administration, and so they can certainly hang that around their necks. And the argument that they've been making in favor of Bidenomics is, yes, inflation has been higher than it has been, and it's still too high, 3%, 3.2%. You wanted it at 2%, but overall, the jobs economy is really good. These other aspects of the economy are really good. All the indicators are there. We're not going to have a recession. We are going to have a soft landing, and it's still too early to say exactly what it is we're looking at here with these jobs numbers that got revised from the 2 months previous and the ones for last month. But it's not trending in the best direction for Harris and Biden. And so they need to start coming up with and are being able to articulate ways to assure Americans that they've got it under control, that they're watching what's happening. I think the Fed wanting to raise interest rates next month, I'm not sure or lower interest rates. I'm not sure that that's going to happen now based on what we've been seeing. But this is kind of what the Fed wanted. The Fed wants to see the economy cooling a little bit to help bring inflation down. So again, it's one of those economic double-edged swords. If you start to make some headway on inflation, then the jobs economy maybe starts to get affected, and you start going into a recession. And it's difficult for the Biden-Harris campaign, the Biden-Harris White House to really be able to articulate a message that'll help Americans feel better. Now, I will say the other side of that coin is I would love to hear Donald Trump, and I would love to hear J.D. Vance on the stump talking about what they would do over the next 4 years to fix the economy, to get the economy on the right track. A lot of the things that they have mentioned, tariffs on foreign goods, some of those things can actually hurt inflation. So I think it's a message that if we do get a debate between these two candidates at some point, which I hope we will, that's going to be a major focal point, especially if it's happening a month from now when we'll have a little bit more information and we'll know a little bit more which way the economy is going.
Right. Well, a couple of things. I mean, Trump has said, in answer to your question, John, Trump has said the old drill, baby, drill. He's talking about lowering energy prices. He's also talked about tax cuts. So those are a couple of things. But in terms of Kamala, a couple of things. The Trump campaign is doing the narrative now, Kamala crash, the Kamala crash. I'm not quite sure if that works. I mean, it's cute, so to speak, kind of ha-ha. But, here's the thing. Like you said, she's vice president, so she's tied to the administration, but at the same time, she's not, senior economic advisor. All right. So she's not like pulling the strings as it relates to economic policy. So I'm not quite sure you can tie it to her. I think you can to a certain extent. But if you look at the polls, I mean, Biden was down about 14 points on the economy to Trump in the polls. It was like 51% for Trump in terms of people supporting Trump on the economy and 37% on Biden. If you look at Harris's numbers, they're now inching upwards. So it's about 50% for Trump and 42% for Kamala Harris. So she's making some inroads. I think the best thing for her at this point, once again, this just in, I'm not a Kamala Harris advisor, nor am I a Donald Trump advisor. But I think what you need to do is you need to change the conversation, because right now, and I'll explain how she does that in a moment, but right now, the conversation is about her being tied to Biden and his policies, which she has to defend. I mean, she has to defend them. She can't distance herself from them. But what she could do, and here's the play, is that you come out with an X blueprint, whatever it is. Come up with your own policies going forward and say, this is what a Harris administration will look like starting in 2025. And let the media and others talk about her 4-point proposals, 10-point proposal, or at least one or two that are going to shift the conversation from what has been, I'm not unburdened by what has been, but what has been to what will be. And I think if you do that, I think that's a way for people to start to at least envision what Harris will bring as opposed to what Biden has brung.
All right. So we have, that's the economy takes right there. I want to address something else here. So the assassination attempt of Donald Trump, it feels to me, guys, just from perusing the media, that it's sort of dropped off the radar almost completely. Now, if you're the Trump team, now I know this was obviously a traumatic event for him, but politically, I mean, he's got to keep that front of mind. I think he can't let that go, right? I mean, because it showed a lot about him and his willingness to fight. That's the iconic image with his hand up, his fist up, right? And that was a galvanizing image for a lot of people, but it seems like the media has just completely shifted their gaze to the newest shiny object, which is, I mean, it's a big deal, right? I mean, we haven't seen somebody drop out of a race like this, so it's understandable to one extent. What does the Trump team do, guys, here to kind of get this? Because obviously this is good for Kamala Harris if you kind of put that one aside and the media doesn't focus on it all. How does Trump get that back into the spotlight? And do you think that's a good idea or not?
John?
But David, you can go ahead and start with that one.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's like, thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dan. I appreciate it. Look, there's nothing they can do, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And let me explain. The fight, that is an image seared into everyone's mind. They don't need to do anything more. I mean, that was a victory, not just in the moment, but I think that's a victory that stays with them through the campaign. I think that's a moment of Trump being a guy that's under siege, even from bullets. And that is an image you won't get out of your mind as a voter, potentially a swing voter. So I don't think, the fact that it's not on MSNBC or CNN all the time, I don't think that matters. I really don't. I think that is something that is kind of gone into the osmosis, if you will, a little bit of the DNA voter gene to a degree. And they're weighing that along with a lot of other things. But I think that cake is, at least that part of the cake has been baked, and that's positive for Trump. So, I just don't see it any other way. So I don't know if they need to do anything more other than the fact that the other day in Georgia over the weekend, he was saying, I think he used the word fraud with Kamala. He said, she's a fraud, and I'm ready to fight, is what he said. So, I mean, they're trying to still keep it alive, but I don't think they need to waste much time on it. I think everybody knows, and they'll remember that image for a very long time to come.
Do you agree with that, John?
Yeah, I do. And I think, the fact that it from what we know about the shooter, it doesn't feel like this was a politically motivated assassination attack. So there's really nowhere to go with it from a political standpoint, right? I mean, and you also don't want to exploit what happened to your advantage too much. Because that can look unseemly. It could really paint the candidate in a negative light. That you can get that snapped back on you real quick. And I think the Trump team is wise enough, and Donald Trump himself knows enough not to gild the lily too much with regard to the assassination attempt. And so I don't know that there's a whole lot more than he can do about it. And I think that's the thing with Donald Trump. There's some inherent positive things that come with having as strong a level of base support as he does. But I think there's also a strong level of base dislike for Trump among a number of the population. And certainly everybody was glad that the president was not more seriously hurt. The former president was not more seriously hurt or killed by the assassin. And certainly it was the way he handled it, certainly, I think, was very presidential. But since in those weeks that have since gone by, we haven't really seen a change in how Trump campaigns or in his in the way he communicates or anything like that. So it almost feels as though the Trump campaign has kind of just put it behind them, and they're not really doing anything with it anymore. And that may be just because there's nothing really to do with it. Even if Joe Biden was still the president, I don't know that the assassination story would still be front and center in our minds, because it's almost like it was a thing that happened. But it didn't, even in the polling right afterwards, the numbers didn't move for Donald Trump all that much. There was no post-assassination bump. If there was, it was for a couple of days, and then the numbers kind of shifted. But then, of course, you had Kamala Harris jump in. Right. So, I think it's been so fluid. This last month has been a wild year. It's been so fluid that even the assassination attempt, it just kind of got buried. Now it's on page like A25 in the style section almost. Yeah,
and if they're not seeing any movement from it when they do bring it up, then why keep doing it? All right. So last thing here, guys. So there's another guy in the race, RFK Jr., and a bizarre story. I just want to get your reaction to this. I mean, he essentially says to Roseanne Barr, who he's talking to, that, oh, hey, by the way, that bear on the bike prank from 10 years ago at Central Park, that was me. The guy in front of me hit it. I was going to skin the bear, and I put it in my truck. Then I didn't want to do it anymore, so I was in New York. I had to get rid. What is going on here? I don't even know what to make of this. And what does this do to this guy's campaign, if anything, if the campaign was going anywhere?
Yeah, I don't think it really was. It was maybe going somewhere for a little bit, but now you got the bear story plus something crawling up in his brain. I give up, John. If you've got something better than that, go for it. Because I got nothing.
He's got worms in his brain. I mean, that's like the third least weird thing about the RFK Jr. campaign, and the fact that he admitted to this, I can't understand. Aside from just having a total leave of his faculties, what would cause him to admit this?
He said there was a story coming out, didn't he?
The New Yorker is going to publish this big story.
Yeah, so he's trying to get ahead of it.
This guy's, he's weird. He's weird. Okay, Governor Tim Waltz can include him in the weird category. He's just weird.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's interesting because I don't know if he moves a small percentage of votes, which in this particular election could actually matter a lot, because
the anti-bear coalition is now going to move into his corner.
Right. All right, gentlemen. David Brody, John Stolnis, thanks so much for breaking it all down. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks.
You got it.
See you, John.